everyone, good evening and welcome to this very special edition of the Jeannie Awards. I am your host Jean and I am so excited to be joining you guys today to present to you the third edition of the Jeannie Awards. I started the Jeannie Awards as a tradition here on this channel to celebrate the best and brightest of film and television, but today's video is extra special because we're not only going to be diving into all of the great releases from 2024, but actually we're going to look beyond that to across the 2020s so far, because we have in fact passed the halfway point of this decade, and what a decade it has been. What a decade it has been, am I right? Honestly, full of twists and turns that no one saw coming, but at this point it's a great opportunity to take stock of the best, the very best films that we have gotten so far. Now, because I'm going to be diving into multiple years of releases, instead of doing what I usually do, which is taking a look at both film and television for this award, I'm only going to be diving into the films, yes, the movie releases from the 2020s so far. And hey, depending on if you guys enjoy today's awards ceremony, if you give me some positive feedback, then maybe we'll take a look at the TV show releases later down the line. We'll see. But in the meantime, we have a lot to get through. As you can imagine, this selection has been a really tough process, especially for someone like me, okay, who is incredibly indecisive and has historically taken many liberties when it comes to the voting process of these awards. But this time around, I swore to myself and every voter on the Jeannie Awards voting body that we would be strict and we would limit our nominees for each category to only 10. Yes, you heard me right. There's only going to be 10 nominees for each of the categories. You could only imagine the stress that I was under as a voter trying to come up with these category nominees, but we finally did it. We finally have a curation of some of the best and brightest releases and performances over the course of this decade so far. And today we have the perfect opportunity to reward these incredible performances and releases, as well as taking a look back to see the best of what the 2020s have had to offer so far in the world of film. So now that you know what we have in store for tonight's special ceremony, let's not waste a second more. It's time to dive into the categories of the night so that you guys can finally know who is going to win the prestigious Jeannie Award. And the first category up is Best Animated Film. Now, many of you guys will know that I am a huge fan of animation, and I feel over the last 5 years we have gotten some of the best, most incredible animated films of the 21st century. Now, I've spoken about this several times on this channel, but I will mention it here as well, as we are celebrating the best of animation over the last few years. But I do believe that there's one particular film that's had such a great gargantuan impact on the field of animation that we can see year after year, and that is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I do believe that this 2018 release changed the game when it comes to the realm of animation, especially Western animation, because it challenged the studios that were stuck in their own boxes and in their own ways doing their usual stuff to think outside of the box, to kind of reach beyond the usual playpen of animation that they had been playing in comfortably over the course of the last few decades, and just think bigger and brighter and more in imaginative ways to give us some of the most incredible, imaginative, innovative projects that we have seen in the whole of the 21st century. We have seen studios try to emulate what made Spider-Verse so special and so unique through their own more recent projects, some of which are represented here on this list. Now, it's not just films that were clearly inspired by Spider-Verse that are represented on my list of nominees. You also have films that stuck in their own lane but just executed really, really well, whether it be through the visual animation, the storytelling. You also have some musicals in there, and if the music was really popping, then it would land itself on this list. But without further ado, it's time to dive into our list of nominees for Best Animated Film. And here we have Encanto, Inside Out 2, Nimona, Pinocchio, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Ron's Gone Wrong, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, The Wild Robot, and Wendell and Wild. And the Genie Award for Best Animated Film goes to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I mean, was there ever any doubt? Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is now a 2-time Genie Award winner. Wow. I mean, I had a look at so many animated films, and I have to say none of them blew me away and just blew my mind the way that Spider-Verse did. And it's fitting considering that Into the Spider-Verse, like I said, was such an influential and inspirational animated film for the 2010s. And so yeah, it shouldn't come to anyone's surprise that Across the Spider-Verse would go home a 2-time Genie Award winner. But a huge round of applause for all of the nominees in this category for being such exceptional films. And I also want to celebrate the variety of studios that we have represented here. I mean, once upon a time, most of these nominees would have come straight from Disney Animation or Pixar, but now we have such diversity in terms of studios. I mean, we have Sony taking home the award, we have a couple of Disney Pixar entries, but we also have Netflix in the game, Paramount with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It really does speak to how the animation space has changed. Disney kind of lost its monopoly in this field over the course of the last 5 years, and honestly I think it's something worth celebrating because, as I said, it's kind of lit a fire under the studio's asses, and now they feel like they need to innovate and push forward in order to compete with the rest, and that's just going to be something that's beneficial to all of us animation fans. Now, moving on from animation, the next category up is Best Comedy Film. Now, my main observation for comedy is that over the last 5 years, we have really seen this genre be impacted by the move away from mid-range films. A lot of the comedies that we know and love from the early 2000s were mid-range films that had budgets from 20 to 80 max million dollars. But we of course know that those kinds of films have disappeared from the theatre landscape and instead have shifted over to streaming. Those are the majority of films that go straight to streaming, and they don't really have the same cultural impact that the comedies from the early 2000s used to. And therefore, predictably, it's also impacted the list of nominees that we have here today, which are mostly made up of films that are comedies, but also something else. They're not just dedicated comedies in the way that we used to see in the early 2000s, which is interesting. But even though I had to think a little bit harder about whether or not these films were strictly comedies or if they were more of something else, I still think that I've come up with a pretty good list of some of the best and funniest comedies that we have gotten over the last 5 years. And so with that, here are the nominees for Best Comedy Film: Barbie, Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Glass Onion, A Knives Out Mystery, Hard Truths, Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul, Poor Things, The Gentleman, The Menu, and They Cloned Tyrone. So do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean when I say that some of these comedies have other genres in there to kind of mix things up? I, for one, welcome this difference though, because I think it makes it a little bit more interesting and dynamic. I love it when a media has, social commentary in there, just kind of adding layers to the story rather than just being a classic slapstick American comedy, the likes of which we used to see tons of in the early 2000s. So whilst it is a shame that we have seen the disappearance of the mid-range movie at the box office, and that has led to fewer straight up comedies ending up on the big screen, I do think that this kind of stand-in for the comedy genre, where you have a mixture of different genres thrown in there, making it a bit more dynamic and a little bit more thought-provoking, is a welcome difference that we have seen in the last 5 years. You'll notice that all of the nominees on this list are extremely well written. They are super witty and clever, but they are also layered with quite a bit of social commentary, whether it be about the church, especially the evangelist churches or Baptist churches in the US, or whether it be about feminism and socialism or generational trauma. All of these stories have many, many layers to them, and that just make them so much more thought-provoking and intriguing to me. And on top of everything, they make me laugh, ha ha ha, and that's what you love to see from these comedies. But who did it best? Well, the Jeannie Award for Best Comedy Film goes to Everything Everywhere All at Once. I mean, this film is the pinnacle of everything that I just described. It's so hilarious in parts, but also quite tragic and also extremely relatable, especially as someone who is an immigrant child herself. The storytelling here is immaculate, on top of the fact that it inadvertently but also perfectly tied in to what was going on in the pop culture zeitgeist, that being the trend of multiverse stories that we have predominantly seen in the superhero movie landscape. Yeah, the fact that this small independent film was able to echo that, but in such an ingenious way that actually overshadowed some of the bigger offerings that we have gotten from the established studios like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Honestly, it was an incredibly impressive feat, and it's no wonder that Everything Everywhere All at Once has emerged a 2-time Jeannie Award winner. Take a breath here, because we have reached the first couple of acting awards. Yes, we are about to discover who I believe are 2 of the very best on-screen performances that we have gotten in the last 5 years. Now, the first of the 2 that we're going to dive into now is Best Supporting Actress in a Film. This was a very tricky category. I mean, first off, you have the question of what is a supporting actress, and that was a whole other issue. But I decided to go by my own metric rather than the metric of any other voting bodies, because I'm not being lobbied by any studio to include some of these actors in supporting when they should be in lead. So I don't have to worry about all that. I don't have to worry about, awards fraud going on, because I can just use my own judgment. Some of you might disagree with some of these selections, but that's all for the discussion to happen down in the comments below. So that's number 1. But number 2, you had the question of how do I determine what makes an exceptional performance enough to be nominated for a Jeannie Award. There were so many variables to consider when trying to decipher what makes an exceptional performance. The line delivery, believability in the character, and hey, what if there's singing and dancing involved? How great were they at that? All of those things matter, but ultimately I decided the biggest variable would be how much of a lasting impression the performance had on me. And in some cases, you know, these performances were years ago, but do they still have that lasting impression? Well, with these nominees, I believe they do. And so here's the list for Best Supporting Actress in a Film. Angela Bassett for Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Ariana DeBose for West Side Story, Ariana Grande for Wicked, Lashana Lynch for The Woman King, Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon, Margaret Qualley for The Substance, Regina King for The Harder They Fall, Stephanie Hsu for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Taraji P. Henson for The Color Purple, and Teyonah Parris for They Cloned Tyrone. And the Jeannie Award goes to Ariana Grande for Wicked. Yes, I believe that my sister Ariana has given the very best performance as a supporting actress in the decade so far. I was blown away by her performance in Wicked. I was particularly impressed by how into it she was. I mean, she was so unapologetically passionate about this project. It was like a dream come true for her, and she took this opportunity with both hands, and you could tell every single second that she was on screen. Not only was she perfectly cast from the aesthetic kind of superficial way, but also because she was so dedicated to the role and didn't hold back at all, which helped make her the perfect match for the character of Glinda. And let's not forget that incredibly difficult tightrope act that Ariana had to perform, portraying the character of Glinda, who in actuality is kind of a dickhead. She's kind of the worst. She's very much a villain, and Ariana was able to toe that line whilst also conveying all of the developing emotions of friendship and care and true selflessness that the character goes through as her friendship with Elphaba develops throughout the film. Ariana delivered on all fronts when it came to the character arc, but then ultimately you have that other kicker of her just being one of the greatest singers of all time, and this is a musical, and that's very much something that I had to take into account when it came to the performances here. We have quite a few performances from musicals in this list, but honestly I would say that Ariana absolutely took the cake, particularly because of her heavenly voice. Although if I was going to give a shout out to anyone else in the musical, it would be for Ariana DeBose, who was as good a dancer as Ariana is a singer. And also a huge shout out to Taraji P. Henson, who absolutely should have been nominated for other awards, other less important awards for her role in The Color Purple, because she was truly astounding in that film. But huge congratulations to Ariana, the first time Jeannie Award winner. So next up, naturally, we have the Best Supporting Actor in a Film, and here the nominees are Chadwick Boseman for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Charles Melton for May December, Clarence Macklin for Sing Sing, Daniel Kaluuya for Judas and the Black Messiah, Glenn Howerton for Blackberry, Jamie Foxx for They Cloned Tyrone, Ray Fiennes for The Menu, Robert De Niro for Killers of the Flower Moon, Ryan Gosling for Barbie, and Tiu Yu for Past Lives. Wow. Wow, we have some killer performances here. Now, my second observation when it comes to supporting actors is that it really is down to the script. I must say, the script definitely helps a supporting actor, because if you have some spice, if you have some substance to work with in the script, that's when you're really able to pick up what the writers are putting down and make something special, magnifique, and truly unforgettable of your role. And this is what each and every one of the actors on this list have been able to do. But my goodness, I have to say that the Best Supporting Actor category was actually the longest list list of potential nominees that I had for these awards. I had over 40 actors listed here on this list, and I had to narrow it down to 10. And boy, was it a struggle, because there have truly been some exceptional performances from supporting actors over the last few years. And I also have to point out that one of the reasons why my list of potential supporting actors was so much longer than the one for actresses is because to this day Hollywood is misogynistic as hell. It's misogynistic as hell, and so there are so many more juicy, interesting roles for actors to sink their teeth into, even in a supporting capacity, versus the roles available for actresses. There are so many more typical kind of wife roles for actresses that don't really give actresses the ability to really sink their teeth into them, to make something special and incredible out of them, whereas actors have plenty of opportunity to portray such an array of different male characters on screen, and that gives rise to them to be able to give these great performances that have a true long-lasting impact. So that's a note that I would give to Hollywood. It's definitely something that you can see when you take a look at the work that's been done over the course of many years, and it's no accident. It's because of misogyny and sexism still in the industry, that we see so many more opportunities for men than there are for women. But these are the men that I determined really rose to the occasion with the roles that they were given. But ultimately, one rises above them all, and the Jeannie Award for Best Supporting Actor goes to Daniel Kaluuya for Judas and the Black Messiah. Truly one of the most impactful performances that we have gotten in the decade so far, and actually in the 21st century so far. Daniel Kaluuya was immaculate as Fred Hampton, and that scene of him saying, "I am a revolutionary," is still tattooed on my brain. It had such a huge impact, but he was incredible from start to finish. And considering the fact that this is a North London boy, okay, you would never know, you could never tell from his performance, because he disappeared into that role. He is a generational talent, and it gives me such great joy to present him the prestigious Jeannie Award for Best Supporting Actor. Okay, so next up we are moving back into film genres, and this is a big one, okay, because this is one of my personal favorites, and that is Best Musical Film. Now, musicals have actually made a huge comeback in the 2020s so far. We have seen so many musicals and such a wide variety of them come out over the last 5 years. It's truly been wonderful to see this almost forgotten genre make a comeback in the 2020s. And again, like I said, there's been such a large variety, whether they be adaptations of stage musicals that made it big on Broadway and the West End, like Wicked or The Color Purple, or even the new West Side Story, which Steven Spielberg circled back to. Or we could even look at the array of musical biopics that we have gotten over the last few years as the musical biopic boom continues, particularly in light of the huge success that was Bohemian Rhapsody in 2018, I believe. You know, all of these different musicals and musical films that we have gotten over the last few years has made for some really great cinematic experiences in my view. And so it brings me such great joy to be able to celebrate this, like I said, previously forgotten genre that wasn't too big in the early 2000s but has made a huge comeback in this decade so far. And so here we have my list of the best of the very best of the movie musical. Better Man, Bob Marley, One Love, Elvis, Encanto, Matilda the Musical, Respect, The Color Purple, The Little Mermaid, Wicked, and Wonka. You see what I mean? What a delightful array. Now, when it comes to my criteria of assessing the best movie musicals, I have to take into account how the script utilizes the medium of films. Because like I said, quite a few of these are stage musical adaptations, or they're even, remakes of animated films, or you even have an animated film in here already. But the medium of film is an entirely different ball game. And so I'm looking out to see how that script really utilizes this medium where possibilities are endless. Because sometimes when you have adaptations of plays or stage musicals, it feels like the director and the writer still think they're in the same confined space as an actual stage, and so they're not utilizing the world building opportunities that film can present. A good movie musical does this. A good movie musical is able to create an entire world that feels so huge and so larger than life, and certainly larger than the stage, to truly make use of the beautiful medium of film. And of course, it goes without saying that a good movie musical needs to have exceptional music. It needs to have exceptional music, and music that you can tap your toe to, or you can feel that emotional connection coming from the characters. Whatever emotion that the music is trying to drive out of its audience, it needs to be effective and it needs to be impactful. And it certainly helps if you have talented people, yes, talented people giving these performances. The last criteria is innovation. I was looking out for films that really stood out from the crowd, that gave us something special and something spicy. I mean, as I said, musical biopics are selling like hotcakes in Hollywood right now. They are extremely popular and at this point a little bit overdone. And so as someone who has watched a whole ton of musical biopics in a short period of time, I have started to see the pattern. I know the rhythm and rhyme of these biopics, and so I'm not easily impressed by them anymore. While the biopics featured on this list to me particularly stood out because they were doing something special and different and interesting. And the Genie Award for Best Musical Film goes to Wicked. Yes, the film that does it all. It ticked all of my boxes and came out on top as the very best example of this movie musical renaissance that we are currently in. Now, as one movie genre rises, another one falls. Because whilst we have suddenly and unexpectedly found ourselves in a movie musical renaissance, this decade so far seems to mark the near end of another renaissance that we have happily lived in over the last previous decade, and that was the comic book movie renaissance. Yes, people have been crying out comic book movie fatigue for a very, very long time, but it seems like the 2020s were really the final nail on the coffin. This decade so far has really seen the decline of the popularity and success of comic book movies, whether it be because of the lack of interest from audiences, or also because of the lack of consistency in the quality of filmmaking within this genre, or both. Why not both? Really, they are interlinked, and as a result we have just seen these franchises fail to capture people's hearts and souls and wallets the way that they used to in the 2010s. But still, even though there has clearly been a lack of consistency when it comes to comic book movie releases in the decade so far, there has still been some exceptional entries, guys. There have still been some exceptional additions to the comic book movie roster in this decade so far. And these are the ones that have made it on my list. So here they are, the nominees for Best Comic Book Film: Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, Deadpool and Wolverine, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Shang-Chi, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man No Way Home, and The Batman. So you see, there are actually some good comic book movies that have come out in the 2020s so far, guys. So let's not act like it's all doom and gloom. It's been pretty bad. But you know, these are the ones that really shone and stood out from the crowd, and they're all the more special considering that we now know how difficult it is to make a good comic book movie. So we do have some pretty good candidates here for best comic book movie, but there is one film that I believe rose above all the rest. And so the Genie Award for best comic book film goes to Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. This is a 2-time Genie Award winner. Yes, it won the same award in the 2022 Genie Awards, the very first to air on this channel. And I just adore this film, guys. As great as I think these nominees are, none of the other nominees have the same emotional impact and tie to me the way that Black Panther does. I think the story of Black Panther is so incredible and so relatable, and the fact that Ryan Coogler was able to bring this film together in the wake of such huge tragedy with the loss of Chadwick Boseman, it was just a miracle in itself. But then the fact that it was good, the fact that the film was actually good and it hit and was incredible is just even more miraculous. And then you have the insanely talented cast with Letitia Wright and Angela Bassett and everyone just delivering brilliant performances. You can tell that this project and this world means so much to each and every one of these people on the cast. They were so perfect for their roles, but they had an extra reverence and extra determination in their performances here. And the story itself is just so sad and so tragic. It has a lot of weight to it in a way that a lot of other comic book movies simply do not. And some of them might be fun and light-hearted and even funny, but they just don't have that same weight and pathos and meaning beyond the realm that they exist in the way that Black Panther does. I mean, the first Black Panther film was a cultural reset. Okay, and to follow up with something that is so meaningful, so powerful, but also incredibly entertaining and just a gorgeous sight to behold, it, like I said, was a miracle that Ryan Coogler was able to accomplish. And truly just hats off to him, because I adore this film. I know it's very, very underrated, but I think if many people rewatched it now, they would realize just how special it is, especially in this crumbling landscape of comic book movies. Okay, so we are taking a break from the movie genres once again to delve into some of the best performances of the decade so far. But these are the big ones, the leading actor categories. Again, this was tough. I mean, there have been so many incredible performances by lead actors that narrowing down each of these lists to just 10 each was really difficult. But I had to be strict with myself and again ask myself ultimately which of these performances had the biggest lasting impact on me, which was crucial, particularly for the performances that are a few years old at this point. But let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into the first category up, and that is Best Actress in a Film. And here the nominees are Andra Day for The United States vs. Billie Holiday, Cynthia Erivo for Wicked, Danielle Deadwyler for Till, Emma Stone for Poor Things, Fantasia Barrino for The Color Purple, Margot Robbie for Barbie, Marianne Jean-Baptiste for Hard Truths, Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Tiana Taylor for 1001, and Viola Davis for The Woman King and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And the Genie Award goes to Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere All at Once, making her a 2-time Genie Award winner. The most prestigious award in her cabinet, no doubt. But, you know, after having a look at all of these incredible performances, both on this list and beyond. But I had to ask myself, what do I think is the defining lead performance of the 2020s so far? And I really do think it's Michelle Yeoh in Everything Everywhere All at Once. I mean, first of all, it helps that she played so many different characters. Again, tying into one of the major trends in the pop culture zeitgeist this decade so far, and that is multiverses and, multiple versions of the same character, and having an actor portray different iterations of a character and show different facets and different personality traits within a performance in a single project. Michelle Yeoh did all of that and she did all of that exceptionally well. And not only that, but the heart and soul of her character wasn't lost in all of the mess and mayhem of the film. She was able to drive it back home, back to that relationship that she had with her daughter in the film, and that ensured that the character arc still had that emotional weight as intended. So not only was she able to deliver on the louder, more snazzier and funnier parts of the role, but also in the quieter moments and the more reflective moments. Okay, so then next up we have the men. Next up we have Best Lead Actor in the film, and here the nominees are Ardash Gaurav in The White Tiger, Bradley Cooper in Maestro, Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer, Coleman Domingo in Sing Sing and Rustin, Denzel Washington in The Tragedy of Macbeth, George Mackay in 1917, Ralph Fiennes in Conclave, Riz Ahmed in Sound of Metal, Will Smith in King Richard, and Zac Efron in The Iron Claw. What an incredible list, if I do say so myself. And on top of that, it was actually really hard for me to come up with the winner of this category, particularly because of the shenanigans from last year. Yes, for those of you who watched the 2023 Genie Awards, you know how hard it was for me to choose the best actor of those awards, because I was stuck between Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer and Bradley Cooper in Maestro. Ultimately, the award ended up going to Bradley Cooper, but I just it did not sit right with me. It did not sit right with me for the longest time. I had to just let it go. I had to let it go, guys. But I was like, damn. But if you're thinking, gee, that's absurd and ridiculous, you also need to remember that Cillian Murphy is already a Genie Award winner, because he already won the very first Genie Awards for his performance in Peaky Blinders. So that was another element that I had to consider for my decision in 2023. But now all of that is put to the side, because they are both featured on this list, as well as some other incredible performances from actors that we have witnessed over the last 5 years. After all of the considering and pondering and umming and ahhing, it's time to reveal who I believe is the best lead actor of the 2020s so far, and who will be winning this prestigious Genie Award for their accomplishment. And the award goes to Will Smith in King Richard. No one should be surprised, guys. No one should be surprised, because from the second that I left the cinema after watching King Richard, I said, someone needs to give this man an Oscar straight away. Someone needs to give this man an Oscar immediately, because that's one of the greatest performances that I have ever seen from him and from anyone over the course of the last few years. Will Smith's portrayal of the Williams patriarch really had a lasting impact on me. I thought he was absolutely incredible in this role. Everything about his mannerisms kind of blended in to the Williams father character, the way that he spoke, the way that he walked, the way that he held himself, but also the little nuggets of wisdom and the lessons that he imparted on his daughters were really inspiring to me. And that, of course, is due to the incredible script, but also to Will Smith's delivery. I just found his realization of this character to be just so immaculate, especially when you compare his performance to real life footage of Richard Williams. And it's just so admirable. And it's especially impressive considering that Will Smith is such a hugely famous and high profile actor. And when you get to that level of fame and success, it can be tough to disappear into a role. But he managed managed to do that with this one, and it was just so perfectly executed. I can't say enough good things about Will Smith's performance in this film and the film itself. It's definitely one of my favorites, put a pin in that, and it's definitely the performance that's had the greatest lasting impact on me. As someone who has rewatched this film many times, it doesn't usually do so for any films, I find this to be the very best from a lead actor in this decade so far. Okay, so now we're moving on to one of my favorite categories in the Genie Awards, because this is the category where I get to spotlight some of the films that have been forgotten and left behind. These are the films that haven't gotten their time in the sun the way that they deserve to, and I want to rectify that immediately. So here we have a whole bunch of films that were incredible and amazing but did not get their due when they were released, and now it's time to wake things up. It's time to wake things up and remind you guys that these films exist and are great, and if you haven't had a chance to watch them, you absolutely should do so. Okay, add them all to your watch list immediately. So of course our next category is most underrated film, and here the nominees are A Different Man, Another Round, Better Man, Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, Gran Turismo, Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul, The Banker, The Book of Clarence, The Iron Claw, and The Tragedy of Macbeth. Many of you will already know how upset I get when a genuinely exceptional film does not get its due, does not get its credit, does not get its box office money. It really breaks my heart, okay? So there might be a few titles on this list where some of you guys might be like, oh yeah, like I saw that. I saw that coming. Like I've heard her rant about that before. That's not surprising. And like good, because it means that I'm consistent at least, right? But in terms of the ultimate, most underrated film of the 2020s so far, the winner of the Genie Award is Better Man. Guys, how can I even verbalize the anger, frustration, and disappointment I feel over the reception that Better Man got? That film deserved so much better. Do not piss me off. Do not piss me off. Are you kidding me? As underrated as all of the other films on this list are, none of them had an active hate campaign driven to lower the box office of this film even more than it already was, the way that Better Man did. Better Man actually got people to hate on it, actively hate on it, purely because some people in some markets, America, didn't know who Robbie Williams was. And so it was branded the Robbie Williams monkey movie in a derogative manner, even though the monkey angle was so innovative and such a special storytelling device that actually fed into the script beautifully and in a way that made sense for Robbie Williams as a persona as well. Like all of that just made sense if you watched the film, but no one wanted to watch the film. And so here we have millions of people missing out on an incredible musical biopic, the very best musical biopic of recent years, actually. Yeah, I said it, okay? And all because they wanted to make a point of not knowing who Robbie Williams is and not giving a shit about him. They missed out on an incredible film out of spite. And honestly, it's their loss. But it's not going to be your loss because you're going to check it out. You're going to check it out now that I recommended it 500 times, because I'm telling you, this film is exceptional. But okay, now we're going from an honorable winner of a Genie Award to a dishonorable one, because next up we have a category that isn't one of my favorites, but it's certainly one of the funnest ones to discuss during the Genie Awards, and that is worst film. Yes, the worst of the bunch, the dishonor of being just trash, just garbage. But this time around, we're not just talking about the worst of the year, we're talking about the worst of the decade so far. So over the last 5 years. And unfortunately for me, this list was actually impossibly long. Like, it was almost as long as my list for best supporting actor. There were a lot of trash, garbage, horrible films that I was subjected to over the last 5 years. But these 10 nominees, they tend to represent something bigger, even if they're not strictly like the worst films ever made of all time, even within this decade so far. They're part of a larger story and narrative that I think is important to highlight here. And I'm not going to be delving into each of these narratives individually, but just from the presence of these films in this list, you'll be able to tell what the narrative is. It all will be clear once I reveal this list. And so here are the nominees for worst film: Cinderella, Coffee and Kareem, Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore, Ghosted, Joker: Folie à Deux, Madam Web, Pinocchio the live action remake, The Deliverance, The Flash, and You People. So hopefully you can see some of the narratives that I'm talking about here through this list of nominees. Because one narrative is the trash, sloppy, forgettable streaming movie. We have a couple of films that belong in that narrative and in that category. And then another narrative is the dying franchise. Literally the dying franchise, as is the case with the Fantastic Beasts movie. You also have the death or decline of comic book movies. Unfortunately, we have quite a few representatives there. And you also have some terrible examples of musicals, and in particular some awful live action remakes coming out of Disney's roster. But even out of this already dishonorable list, one of them takes the cake, and the winner for the Genie Award for the worst film goes to The Flash. If you have any questions as to why, go check out my review, I guess. But I really shouldn't have to explain this. Have you seen the baby scene? Have you seen the scene where he puts the baby in the microwave? I shouldn't have to explain. Come on, guys. But congratulations to The Flash for winning a Genie Award, I guess. Okay, guys, so we are in the final stretch with only 2 more major Genie Awards to give out. How are we doing? Are we good? Have we finished all our snacks? Are we nice and cozy and comfortable, getting ready for bed at this time probably? But I hope you can stick with me for the last 2 awards of the night. And first up, we have Best Drama Film. What a huge, gargantuan category. And in terms of my topmost criteria when it comes to this category, it would definitely be impact. You know, which of these films had the largest impact on me personally, even far beyond their release dates. We're talking about films that really went outside of the box, especially when it comes to the typical formula for awards baity dramas. We all know at this point that when it comes to the major awards shows, including the Genie Awards, dramas tend to sweep up a whole bunch of statues. The point where a lot of studios have a specific formula for the types of dramas that they want to create to get as many of those statues as possible. But I was looking out for the dramas that really did something special and magnifique. And hey, if they were going to follow the formula, at least they did so in such a precise and incredible way that it really had a lasting impact on me. And also, as someone who is a huge sucker for cinema, I am looking out for that cinematic quality in a film, particularly in this landscape where we have tons of streaming movies coming out week after week and films feel more disposable than they ever have before. The films that really stood out to me are the ones that have that cinematic, timeless quality to them. Whatever subgenres they might explore on top of that drama, I still need to have that substance, that weight of a well-made film. And that includes all of the technical aspects like cinematography, production design, costuming, hair, makeup. I want the whole works. That's what I need to help me feel like for the next 2.5 hours or so, I am in that world. And so here we have the films that did it best in my opinion. My nominees for Best Drama Film are 1917, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Judas and the Black Messiah, King Richard, Oppenheimer, Sound of Metal, The Harder They Fall, The Iron Claw, and The Woman King. And the Genie Award for Best Drama goes to Dune Part 2. Yes! Dune Part 2 has taken home this prestigious award for being everything I described and more. I mean, if you consider my criteria, then how can Dune not be the winner, honestly? What an incredible film. And others may have ignored it, but I sure didn't. It is absolutely deserving of being considered the best drama so far of the 2020s. So now guys, we have reached the end of the Genie Awards with the last award of the night, and this award is always a special one because it gives us a chance to take a look back and connect the dots between certain trends and certain events that have been taking place in the entertainment industry and rank those that are the most prominent and the ones that have had the biggest impact across the year. Well, today we're not just going to be taking a look at the previous year, but rather across the 5 years so far of the 2020s. And I have found some pretty big trends that have had a huge impact on the film industry over the last 5 years, some of which I've already touched on throughout this ceremony. But let's put all of the puzzle pieces together and go through my list of the biggest trends of the 2020s so far. And the nominees are disgustingly inflated film budgets. The 2020s so far has been a decade of expense, with an increasing number of films exhibiting some huge, grossly inflated budgets. A lot of these films even surpassing the $300 million mark. It used to be that major blockbusters like the Avengers films, for instance, would have $200 million to $250 million budgets, and it would be justified because a huge billion-dollar return was expected. In this post-COVID world, we have seen an increasing number of films that have reached the $300 million mark in their budgets with no real expectation for them to recover any of this money, let alone make a profit. Although it is understandable that some of these situations have been due to COVID and increased amounts dedicated to COVID protections, but there have also just been many cases of fraudulent spending that has been totally outrageous. Next up, we have fantastic films flopping at the box office, and this is something that I've talked about on many occasions. I don't think it bears repeating at this point, but unfortunately over the last few years we have seen people be extremely selective about which films they give a chance to in the cinemas, to the point where getting good reception, whether it be from critics or audiences, sometimes still isn't enough to get people to go see the film in theaters, leading to box office disasters for films that certainly did not deserve it. Next up, legacy sequels galore. Legacy sequels are the kinds of sequels that come many years, perhaps even decades after the initial film, and we saw them dotted around the 2010s, but we have seen a huge upsurge of them in the 2020s as Hollywood tries to recycle the formulas that has worked for it over the last few years to its detriment. There are some cases where the legacy sequels work, but more and more we see terrible follow-ups to beloved films that many audience members are just turned off from at this point. Next up, we have musical biopic dominance. I already mentioned the surge in movie musicals that we've seen in the last few years, and that can be a trend in its own right. But I think we've specifically seen an increase in musical biopics being released by Hollywood, particularly after the huge success of Bohemian Rhapsody. Rhapsody. And to be fair, many of these musical biopics are decent in quality, leading us to perhaps believe that whilst other genres like the comic book movie genre might be flailing at the box office, perhaps the musical biopic has become the new reliable genre that people flock to see in cinemas. Next up, the return of the rom-com. As mentioned, Hollywood isn't taking as many mid-range movies to cinemas anymore, reserving them instead for streaming. But the streaming space seems to be the perfect medium for the return of this beloved subgenre, which really thrived in the early 2000s and late 90s and kind of took a dip in the late 2010s. Well, now we've seen a resurgence of them, especially in the streaming space, but there have also been big box office successes that have emerged even beyond streaming, which leads us to believe that rom-coms are here to stay. Next up, we have streaming slop. I mean, there isn't really much to explain here. It's something that I've been discussing throughout the ceremony, but streaming has really led to a decline in the quality of films that we've been seeing coming out of Hollywood, to the point where the streaming film has a look and feel of its own that many people are really sick and tired of seeing. It must be noted though that there is a considerable difference between the average streaming slop film where you have an A-list actor collecting a huge ginormous paycheck to just wander around in front of a green screen spouting nonsense versus the streaming awards contenders, because the 2020s is actually the first decade where we saw streamers actually compete in the awards in a big way, to the point where Apple TV Plus even won Best Picture with Coda. And finally on the list, we have the death of comic book movies. As I said, people have been crying out comic book movie fatigue for a very long time now, but it's only really been prevalent in this post-Endgame world where it seems like the likes of Marvel Studios has completely forgotten how to consistently make exceptional comic book movies the way that it was able to throughout the 2010s. This lack of consistency, combined with the just general fatigue surrounding the popular tropes of comic book movies, has led to fewer and fewer people flocking to the cinemas to go see these films. On top of that, you also have fewer talent in Hollywood interested in making comic book movies as they see the writing on the wall. This has created a pretty lackluster environment for comic book movies to exist in, and whilst we have a few bangers that emerge from the rest really do pull down the batting average, making it a less exciting and interesting genre for people to dive into in the 2020s. And so finally, the winner of the last award of the night, the Jeannie Award for biggest trend of the 2020s, goes to the death of cinema. Yes, unfortunately, the 2020s has not been a kind decade so far for the cinema going experience. Due to COVID and a whole bunch of different factors, theatres have really declined in popularity, and year after year it seems to take so much more for people to make the commitment to go outside, spend buckets of money on both cinema tickets and concessions, and take the time to sit down in a dark room in front of a big screen to watch a film in theaters. Something that was considered to be a fun little outing in the 2010s and previously is now considered a whole financial and social commitment for many in this day and age. It's really sad to see the decline of cinemas. Hopefully it can be reversed. But as I said, with the increasing prices as well as the time and effort commitment that it takes to go to the cinema, alongside the fact that theatre going is only one of plenty of others sources of entertainment these days, not least streaming in the mix, it's tough to say what will become of this time-honored tradition in the remaining years of the 2020s. So that's it from me, guys. We have officially reached the end of this prestigious awards ceremony. Thank you so much for joining me for this special edition of the Jeannie Awards. Hopefully I will see you all at another Jeannie Awards ceremony sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.